Support us by subscribing, ring the notification bell and thumbs up, thank you. Members from the Task Force Barrier Construction Team welcomed the Acting Director of the Bureau of Land Management, William Perry Pendley, to view Task Force barrier projects at San Diego 4, San Diego 11 and El Centro 1 this week for an overview and project updates. According to Troy Olson, Chief of Construction for Task Force Barrier, who manages military-funded border projects in California, Arizona, and New Mexico, he received briefings and met with senior leaders and project managers. San Diego Force will extend on the secondary fence and as well as the primary fence. IT will be extended east up over the hill where the primary will connect into A1, which was constructed back in about 2009 or 2008. Providing direction and oversight of the Department of Defense, funded construction of barrier system projects along the southwest border. Pendley said he learned a lot during the trip, noting how much seeing projects and talking with subject matter experts along the barriers and construction sites helps him to grasp important measures he may have to relay onto stakeholders. Task Force barrier contractors installing 30-foot steel bollard barrier panels at project site Yuma 1 along the southern border of the United States, near Yuma, Arizona. These projects are being executed by USACE, as directed through the U.S. Army by the Secretary of Defense, in response to Department of Homeland Security's request for assistance to help secure the United States' southern border by blocking drug smuggling corridors, through the construction of roads and fences, and the installation of lighting under the Title 10, Section 284 of the U.S. Code. DoD and USACE are executing these projects, in support of U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Also, a U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Task Force barrier contractor installs barrier panels at the San Diego 11 project site near San Diego, California. USACE is providing direction and oversight for Department of Defense-funded construction of border barrier projects from California to Texas. Although they are building these barriers, 3 proposed sections of border wall for Arizona were put on hold, according to a federal court filing, because they were going to cost more than the Defense Department planned on spending. The Army Corps of Engineers has determined that there are insufficient contract savings to undertake the 3 additional projects, totaling 20 miles of construction on the U.S.-Mexico border, that Defense Secretary Mark Esper originally approved last month, per court documents. The filing is part of 3 ongoing lawsuits, over using $2.5 billion in DoD counter-drug funding on border projects. The Supreme Court lifted a freeze on that spending, handed down by a lower court, in July. But as the suit is ongoing, the Pentagon must file updates to its plans in federal court. Back in August, the Corps of Engineers estimated it would be able to build that additional 20 miles of wall after crunching the numbers and finding lower than expected contract costs, meaning more money freed up for more construction. That $2.5 billion is meant to build more than 100 miles of border barriers through California, Arizona, and New Mexico. In September, Defense Secretary Mark Esper approved the use of $3.6 billion more, the cost of 127 military construction projects in the U.S. and abroad, to build or reinforce 11 more sections of wall. At the time, defense officials told reporters on background that building more barriers meant less need for troops to deploy to the border to defend it. The projects are on the books for throughout 2020, officials said, and border deployments are expected to continue at least that long. As of late August, early September, the department had spent $450 million to fund those deployments. President Trump and his administration said last month that they plan on building between 450 and 500 miles of fencing along the nearly 2,000-mile border by the end of 2020. An ambitious undertaking funded by billions of defense dollars that had been earmarked for things like military base schools, target ranges and maintenance facilities. 2 other Pentagon-funded construction projects, in New Mexico and Arizona, are underway, but some are skeptical that so many miles of wall can be built in such a short amount of time. The government is up against last-minute construction hiccups, funding issues and legal challenges from environmentalists and property owners whose land sits on the border. The Trump administration says the wall, along with more surveillance technology, agents and lighting, is key to keeping out people who cross illegally. Critics say a wall is useless, when most of those apprehended turn themselves into Border Patrol agents, in the hope they can be eventually released while their cases play out in immigration court. So far this year in 2019, Border Patrol agents in the Yuma sector have apprehended over 51,000 family units. That's compared with just over 14,500 the year before, about a 250% increase. The Yuma sector is the third busiest along the southern border, with officials building a temporary, 500-person tent facility in the parking lot of the Border Patrol's Yuma headquarters back in June. But the number of people apprehended, alone, the entire southern border fell by 61% between this year's high point, in May and the end of August. In Yuma, it fell by 86%, according to government figures. Most people apprehended are either traveling as families or are unaccompanied children. The drop is largely due to the Mexican government's efforts to stop migrants from heading north, after Trump threatened tariffs earlier this year to force Mexico to act. Victor Monjaras Jr., a former Border Patrol chief, who's now a professor at the University of Texas, El Paso, was an agent when the government put up the first stretch of barriers along the southern border, in San Diego. He's seen barriers evolve from easily collapsible landing mats installed by agents and the National Guard to the sophisticated, multi-billion-dollar projects now being done by private contractors. Monjaras says tall border fencing is crucial in some areas and less helpful in others, like remote stretches of desert where shorter barriers and more technology, like ground sensors, would suffice. One form doesn't fit in all areas, and so the fence itself is not the one solution. It's a combination of many things, Monjaras said. There are also more legal hurdles the Trump administration may face in the future. Some include lawsuits from landowners, who aren't giving up their property so easily, and environmentalists who say the barriers stop animals from migrating and can cut off water resources. The Tohono O'odham tribe in Arizona also has expressed opposition to more border fencing on its land, which stretches for nearly 75 miles along the border with Mexico. Near Yuma, the Cocopi Indian tribe's reservation is near the latest fencing project, and leaders are concerned it will block the view to its sacred sites. Some critics who are supporters of Trump have long argued that more focus, effort and money needs to point to enforcing current laws and making them harsher. For example, any employers who are caught hiring illegals will be arrested and charged with a felony as well as a minimum $100,000 fine. There are smarter and different ways to approach the illegal immigration problem by not just focusing on barriers along the border. Anyways, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, ring the notification bell, and thumbs up. And remember, peace through strength.